Okay, so welcome everyone. My name is Dr. Jacqueline Miller. I am the director here at the Evans School of Public Policy and Governance at the University of Washington. I want to welcome you to our Executive MPA Veteran Student Perspective Fall 2024 panel discussion. I always like to start each session with our land acknowledgement. And so we'll do that. I will stop sharing screens and then we will go into our panel discussion. So the University of Washington acknowledges the Coasalish peoples of this land, the land which touches the shared waters of all tribes and bands within the Suquamish, Tulalip, and Muckleshoot nations. The Evans School acknowledges that we are on the traditional land of the first people of Seattle, the Duwamish people, past and present, and honor with gratitude the land itself and the Duwamish tribe. And so I want to take a moment to welcome our panelists. I really appreciate your time. Our panelists are here from our Executive MPA program. They are also military. And so tonight we're going to be talking about their military experience and that transition into the AMPA program and how they saw their careers grow and develop as being a part of the program. So I'll start with Tom. Tom, would you introduce yourself?
Yeah, thanks, Dr. Miller. So my name is Tom O'Connor, and I graduated from the EMPA program in, I should look at the wall, for 2022. So I was sort of a COVID cohort where we did a lot of online stuff, and our residency was actually at the end. And that actually worked out really well. A military background, and from last century, I was in the Air National Guard for 2 years, and then I transitioned to active duty Coast Guard for 4 years, which was a great experience and really set me on the path to public service for my entire career. So I currently serve as the Division Chief of Special Operations for the Vancouver, USA Fire Department. And I manage all our hazardous materials, technical rescue, and maritime response programs here at the fire department. Dr. Miller, you're muted.
Sean?
Sure. Thanks, Dr. Miller. My name is Sean Darline. I am a graduate of the EMPA program as of last week, so brand new. Happy to be out here in the real world. I was an active duty Army infantry captain, came out of JBLM here in Washington, so I've been here for a minute and love it here. And now I am the Deputy Director of Passenger Experience here at Sound Transit, where I oversee alternatives to policing programs, including things related to homelessness, behavioral mental health crisis, and all kinds of different stuff with a team of about 100 people. So really honored to be invited, Dr. Miller.
Thank you. And Stephen?
Hey, everyone, and thanks, Dr. Miller. I'm Stephen Frazier. I served in the Marine Corps, enlisted for 4 years, went to school on my GI Bill, and then went into the finance industry. And then after a couple years in finance, I went to the Federal Reserve Bank of San Francisco, where I've been for about 2 years, where I am a risk analyst, doing some financial and risk analysis for banks in our district. And I am actually a first year in the EMPA program, so still very much in it, not on the other side yet.
Wonderful. I'm not sure if John is still having technical there he is. John, would you introduce yourself?
Sure. I'm John Lambert. I served in the Navy for a while, and then after college, undergrad, I went to National Guard, Army Infantry. I'm currently, I did the Evans School program also during the COVID years. And I am now out in Washington, D.C., working at the State Department as a foreign affairs officer.
Welcome. So I think my first question to my panel is, why did you choose the Evans School?
Okay. Yes. Go same order. I can answer that. So I actually did my bachelor's degree after my time with the Coast Guard, and that was a cohort model, which was a very important thing to me to be in with sort of a group that was doing the journey in the same path. So much later, when I was looking at models for EMPA, certainly didn't choose the cheapest one. Looking at Evans and the idea of the cohort model, and actually a lot of the structure of the schedule was really attractive to me. The original schedule, of course, was more in person. That's not the way it worked out. But as it turned out, we had a cohort of 38. I think we had 3 current Navy officers and a retired vice admiral, which was really interesting to have in a group from that perspective. But also Evans, it appeared like it was going to be a much more diverse cohort. And one of the things I tried to do in my career, my bachelor's, and I wanted to do it for my master's, was the fire department is a wonderful place to work. I work with a lot of great people, but it's really an echo chamber sometimes. And stepping into a program where I was we got a police officer when I first started, but he had to drop out and come back into the next cohort. So I was the only public safety person in the 38-person cohort, which was tremendous for me. If I want to talk to firefighters, that's easy. I walk down the hall. But it was a really diverse cohort. A lot of we had, I think, maybe a third were nonprofit folks, about a third were current public sector folks, and a third were private sector folks, either looking for more public administration knowledge or looking to transition into the public sector. So it was a tremendous experience for me, the power of the cohort.
I could go next if we're going in order. So thanks, Tom. I worked after I got out of the Army here at JBLM, I worked for Pierce County, Washington, where I was in charge of Veterans Affairs, broadly speaking. But specifically I worked on veterans homelessness and anything social service related. So there I knew a lot of my boss, a lot of folks that got opportunities to attend through their MPA program through the Evans School. And I knew I kind of wanted to pursue that route in one shape or form, hearing just such positive feedback on all their experiences. And then my wife actually ended up getting the Gates Scholarship and coming here for law school. And so she started law school, and I decided, why not just both be miserable at the same time? I'm just joking. It was a great experience. But we were both, if she's going to be busy, I might as well be busy too. And it was a no-brainer. So getting to start at the same time, going through the program while she was doing law school was awesome. And then just getting such a great opportunity to get all that exposure. I was really glad that she chose to stay here in Washington and at the University of Washington in particular. So that way I didn't have to go look at other programs and everything. This was my top program of choice.
Yeah, for me, I think I'm the only person in my cohort who's not based in Washington or at least the Pacific Northwest. I'm down in San Francisco. And I was looking at several programs around the country. I was fairly confident that I wanted to do a program in public administration, public affairs, or public policy, and was looking at several different programs and several different structures. It was important to me to go to a quite reputable school or reputable program. If I was going to make that commitment, I wanted it to be in a very serious program. And Evans had, a serious program with a, substantial curriculum, but also a good reputation, and the flexibility of the sort of hybrid schedule worked for my job, and it just kind of fit in my life. Whereas some programs I felt like didn't have enough of an in-person component or too demanding of an in-person component if I was going to be traveling for it. And so I also have some family up in the Pacific Northwest, so it was kind of also not just purely for academic and professional reasons that I chose Evans, but also sort of the personal and lifestyle choice of having a good excuse to come stay with family when I come to school, visit family more often. So it was just kind of the perfect fit for me.
I think I'm next. For me, it was I was already at the University of Washington for undergrad. I'd gone out and worked a bit for Department of Defense as a civilian afterwards. And a friend of mine had just graduated from the Evans School, and that's how I learned of the Evans School. The curriculum, I looked it up, and it was just phenomenal. I knew I wanted to work in governments, and all the courses for the Evans School, spoke to all the skill sets that are, would be helpful to go work in the government. So that was a very easy choice for me to make. And obviously, my undergrad was UW, so might as well double down.
I forgot one point that John just reminded me of. This is kind of a silly reason, and it wasn't one of my top criteria, but I would be lying if I didn't say it was a small piece. I didn't go to a big sports undergrad school, so I thought it would just be the icing on the cake if I went to a graduate school that had, big football team, school spirit, all that good stuff. So now proud to be a Husky, and I joined at just the right time where we went to the college football national championship last year, and there's been some good good football to be associated with now. So just on a lighter note and a less serious point, that was also had a little bit of an effect in me choosing the program.
I know a lot of the prospective students that I speak to from military always ask, how long coming out of the military do you go right into grad school, or do you take some time off to say, I really just need to breathe a minute and then reevaluate? So can you talk to us about what was your decision-making process when you decided to leave the military and grad school?
Yeah, I can start. So I waited 30 years to go to grad school. So, and for me, I was already in my career, and honestly, I didn't need a graduate degree credential to move up or do anything like that. I'm already in the position that I hold. But I felt like leading, especially the younger part of our workforce, I just needed to sharpen the saw here as far as and Evans is very, very heavy into diversity, equity, inclusion. I had a really diverse cohort, and that was the piece that I needed. So really sitting in the rank or the chair that I am, I'm not looking to leave this chair. I love my job. I love where I stand, but I wanted to be better at it, especially as we're trying to bring young people into public service. And I think public service in general is having trouble drawing, folks. So I don't think you need to think about, I'm going to, get my bachelor's or get out of the service, and 2 years later, I'll go to grad school. You can wait 10 years, 20 years, whatever kind of works for you. There's that sweet spot. Like, if your kids are sort of this certain age, it's really hard to go to grad school. So I got my bachelor's in before my kids got too old. And then once my kids were sort of off the payroll, went back for, I went back for grad school. And it's really, to be honest, it's really reinvigorated me. I thought about retiring, and I'll probably work another 4 or 5 years just because I'm probably excited, from coming out from Evans and then really bringing all these young folks in. So I come at it from a little different perspective. My wife just finished her doctorate the same year that I finished my master's. So one of you was talking about sharing the pain at the same time, and that was actually a really good thing for us to do.
Yeah, I think I reiterate everything Tom said except for the 30 years. So I did it within a couple years after getting out of the active duty. I think it's probably about like timing to some extent. Like mine made sense. My wife was starting law school. For us, our needs, we don't have kids, right? So it was like wanting to just get this done as a next step. We both were in that process of transitioning into different careers, different things. I also would note, like, it kind of also depends on what you're doing, probably right up to that point in the military. So my last couple of years in the military were way more slow paced than the years prior, as anybody in the military could probably attest to, that you have ebbs and flows, right? And so you spend a lot of time thinking about what you want to learn, what you want to do, but not really having the time to go do that stuff yet. So I kind of mapped out more in that period, went out, started getting some experience, started refining that, and then went right into the thing. So it met my personal needs, and I also just was anxious to get started. I really wanted to get started, and I really don't regret going straight into it for my sake.
I really agree with everything that Sean and Tom said. And I think it depends on each person. For some people, going directly into grad school after military service, I guess if you are an officer or if you already have your bachelor's, can be a great way to sort of have some time to pivot and transition. But also, if it's 30 years later, that works too. So I'd say it's very dependent on each person. For me, I was out of the military for almost 10 years by the time I went to grad school, but I served as an enlisted Marine, and so I had to go get my bachelor's afterwards. But I'm about 4 years beyond my bachelor's. So yeah, it just depends on each individual, and you know the timing again is very individual. So I would say if the timing is right, even if you're close to retiring like Tom was, or if you're very early career professional, I think getting an advanced degree, kind of early is good. It can, kind of accelerate your career, but also, like Tom said, it can sort of give your career a second wind. So there's really no right or wrong time. It's all just individual timing.
For me, it was, I guess the timing was more just on when my windows of opportunity to go to school were. I was in the Guard at that point in time, and I knew I had a deployment, lurking in the not too far distance there, and I just had to time it just right, between deployment with school, and ended up having to have a gap in my graduate school, so I had to take a year off to go do military activities, and then come back. But that year off spent doing military things definitely was not a welcome break, but unfortunately it was what it was, and it was necessary. So yeah, I think you just have to fit it in when you can and when it makes sense. And yeah, that's all I have.
Thank you. So as you look back on your military career, how did that shape your experience in the executive MPA or MPA program?
So when I was 18, I remember talking to my dad. I remember way back here. My dad was an Air Force officer. He went to the Citadel. My brother was an Air Force officer. So we've got some of that in there. And I remember telling my dad specifically that there's two things I didn't want to do. And then one was to go in the military, and the other one was anything to do with medicine. There's nothing to do with those things. And of course, I wound up going in the service. I want to be a medic, doing some other things as well. So, so much for the wisdom of the 18-year-old. Tell me the question again, Dr. Weller. I'm sorry. I was telling my story.
I love stories. Don't worry. It sucks me in every time. The question was, given your military career, how did it bring it into your Evans EMPA experience?
Sure. Well, the P of the EMPA, right? So, the military put me on the path of public service and being part of something bigger than myself, which, when you're 18, maybe those aren't things you're thinking about. So the Coast Guard, which is a very civilian-oriented military branch, connected me with a lot of those opportunities to really make a direct difference. We got to do our job, either rescue work or law enforcement work, a lot of training as well. But we're out there every day doing this in small communities, and so I knew that the public piece of it was what I wanted to do, and I wanted to be part of something bigger than myself, and I continued to do that, with the fire service afterwards. And I did have, I did have one retirement already. That's probably important to mention, because I thought I was done with the fire service in 2015, and I stepped away from meter and went to the private sector, and did not like it at all. I really missed the teamwork, the service, sort of the honor, making the difference thing. And then I stepped back in a leadership role in a different fire department in Vancouver. So I think that I was looking at MBA programs. I applied to a couple and got into a couple, but I really looked at the curriculum and I really looked at the focus, and it probably would have been a fine choice, but the 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 P in EMPA is what really pulled me hard.
Yeah, and I think to piggyback off that, having just finished the program, and one of the things that stood out to me is working with peers, some of them coming from nonprofit space, others public sector, others who are coming from smaller, local municipalities, local districts, all kinds of things like that, and even like the private sector. It becomes clear through these, like the cohort that Tom was talking about, and working so closely with these folks, the different and diverse experiences everyone had. And one of the standouts that I felt like became clear for those who had the military service, you start realizing, okay, you come from a very, very structured, bureaucratic, and standardized system, and there's some benefits to that, and how that accelerates a lot of your thinking on things that the EMPA really helps bring out, of like, okay, here's how you create those standards, here's how you utilize them better, more efficiently, all these things. And you start taking them for granted in the military, but anybody who goes into the public sector and to these spaces start realizing, like, oh, we need SOPs for this, we need documentation, all this stuff that oh, you have to write. There's not some massive bureaucratic machine that's just pumping this out, and you just grab it and you follow it and you create training off it and all that stuff. And so it kind of accelerated the public thinking in a way that I wouldn't have suspected early on, and really kind of set you apart from the folks that are coming in and looking at it from a lens of, hey, I need to understand what is a bureaucracy, what are these structures, before I can even figure out how to build them, design them, operate them, run them, and stuff. So I thought that was incredibly valuable for me in the program.
Yeah, I think similar to Sean, um, coming from a public service or a public institution, a public service institution, the Federal Reserve, I think I have one view on bureaucracy and on public service, and can make contributions accordingly to my cohort. But also having military experience, I think, gives you an additional dimensionality and like a very unique view on bureaucracy and on public service and public institutions that I think really sort of enriches the contribution that you're able to make to your cohort, or at least was my experience. So I found it very helpful in that sense.
For me, I'd say a lot of what Sean talked about with the structure also resonated with me. But I also think that anyone who's been in the military also has that sense of like accomplishing the mission, and the mission comes first. And, be it, working on group projects, or just know that you have a goal to set yourself in this program to accomplish this degree or this program within the degree, and just that drive to accomplish that mission. And I think that's something that definitely was a benefit to me while being in academia.
Thank you. So as you think back on your time, whether it was in the EMPA or the MPA, what did time management look like to you? It's a little different as you go through school, and yeah, how did that look for you, time management?
So actually, getting a master's degree during COVID was great. It, all kinds of time, right? And as it turned out, we were the 38, the cohort of the willing to take this on. But if my pre-COVID life, it would have been more of a challenge. But that's why I picked the, sort of those 3-day immersion windows that Evans offers. And we had talked about earlier about the phase in your life that you choose to do it, and there's that negotiation with either your spouse or other significant others about how much time is this going to take and how am I going to allocate it to this, the whole thing. But I do think it's easier to be away for 3 days than it is to be away every Tuesday and Thursday night for 2 years, right? Or some of those other models that are out there. So I didn't find it particularly difficult, the time management, just because of the nature of my work and maybe my education and work experience. And certainly, way in the rearview mirror, the military experience certainly was helpful with time management. You get real good at that early on in the military.
Yeah, I think I'm jealous of Tom saying that the COVID would have been a nice time to do it. I kind of did it after like being at home, work from home, and all kinds of stuff like that. So my job is in the office every day. I have a lot of direct reports and a growing team, and we deal with crisis management type work. So it is all hours of the day. So my job alone is a lot to manage for my time, and it is really easy to just get pulled in, when a train is broken and all of a sudden I have teams stuck in different locations. And I'm sure Tom has some relation to that, but I'm building out a team here. It's a lot of work. And so the consistency of the EMPA program, that it was, you knew when your weekends were going to be. And so just knowing, hey, this is when I got to do this, was critical along the way. And basically every weekend I knew I should be doing something. If it's the weekend before, I need to do something. If it's the weekend during, you're going to be in class. The weekends after, you might have something to do, and it would be varying levels. But I just knew weekends meant I'm doing something. Maybe it's not always in class and maybe it's not much, but I should probably be doing something. And that consistency and having that schedule in advance was the only way I think I could have survived this program. I had to miss one weekend and I enrolled in a standard evening class, and I will tell you, I could not do that for the whole program. It was just be too much. Like every week is different, when it's due, what the due dates are, what the assignments are. Just knowing that when I'm done, I'm done. It was like being an hourly worker versus like a salary worker, that you log off and you're done, you're out of here. And that was so refreshing, especially when my job was not that way.
Yeah, I couple things. I think that it's important to prioritize your time and luckily for me, um, the nature of my work is sort of when it rains, it pours, but there might be some downtime. And so am very, jump at the opportunity if it's relatively slow or there's nothing going on in the morning, I'll, take some time to do some reading or some studying. Um, or take advantage of lunch breaks and things like that. So sacrifice a little bit of the sort of like relaxing time when I might normally take my lunch or like go to lunch with colleagues, but use that time to sort of go through some homework. I found, when you just have more things on your plate, you find ways to squeeze it in and ways to make it work. Another thing that I did that sort of helped me stay on top of it was think about school instead of reading a book before going to bed, read one of the assigned papers. Or I sort of thought about it as a hobby or as an intellectual interest or sort of a reading habit. I just made that, watch rather than watching TV, watch one of the, assigned videos to watch. So I kind of just made it a little bit of a hobby, which also helped kind of ingrain it in my lifestyle and helped me sort of be very consistent in getting through the required materials. Um, I applied slightly better study skills and better time management than I did in undergrad, but I would also be lying if I didn't say there was some sort of sprints to the finish, turning things in at 11:58 and 29 seconds instead of midnight. But I think just consistency is key, and being really smart with your time is really helpful. And I do think it's a little different than undergrad, where I think it's a little easier to fit it into your lifestyle and fit it into your schedule because it's not as uh, sort of forced. It's much more organic. You're choosing to go to graduate school, and so I find that for me, and it sounds like a lot of my cohort mates, it's more organic to prioritize school, and it's not as much of a burden because we're all adults putting ourselves in this position.
I don't have much more to offer than Sean, Tom, or Steven did. I will say I did make heavy use of Excel spreadsheets to keep track of when all deadlines were and what stage of the project I was working on, or what paper I was working on. So um, I definitely tried to use technology to uh, keep me on track. So that's all I'll say.
Thank you. So thinking back on your experience in the EMPA and the MPA program and what you learned, what advice would you give for veteran students who are considering going back to school? What advice would you give yourself if you were sitting in their space now, knowing what you know, given that you've gone through the program?
Well, I would say think about your goals as far as, I mean, the strategy I use is I have a working resume where I put potential goals on the resume and see how they look and come back and look at the document. And so I put, the MPA from UW on there and looked at it for a while. Um, there's never a perfect time to go to grad school. There's never a perfect time to do many things that we do. And then at some point you got to jump, with both feet. And then there will be those pressures, like Stephen was saying. I call that strategic procrastination, which provides appropriate pressure to get the assignment done, right? So I think that works. But it's you take all the factors that we've talked about in your career and your personal life, your family life, your personal life, ultimately being probably the most important thing at the end of it all. And how do you fit that in? And so, I never would have imagined that the best time to get a master's would be during the pandemic. And I sort of had to come to that thought and then come in. So, whenever you choose, if you choose to do the EMPA in Evans, it will be a great experience for you. It's just a question of where does that fit on the calendar, and there won't be any month or any year that's labeled at the top perfect time. So that's what I would say.
Yeah, I think I can't speak for everybody's military experience, but working full time in a hectic job while doing this program, I don't want to say that the program's not a lot of work or that's a lot to take on or anything like that, but for me personally, I think what I would note is I've been asked to do more with less, right? Like, and that's the nature of the Army and the military and all that kind of stuff, right? So, it's not impossible, and getting through it it's definitely doable. For me personally, it's doing it fast and consistent is a better routine than just drawing it out and trying to do it over a significant period of time. But it was a lot of fun. It was great. I learned so much. I had so much that I could apply to work, and maybe that was the nature of my job, but I felt like a lot of my cohort and my peers also had that. So they truly make it they spend a lot of time, and you really feel it making it such a great experience that you could build out that resume, build out a bunch of stuff and take it with you wherever you go. And I truly found it to be such a great period of time. And having just finished, I'm going to miss having those weekends. I'm also somewhat glad that I get some weekends back, but it was nice to go through at that time.
Yeah, I'll try not to duplicate any of the great advice that's been given out by anyone. I think something that me and my cohort have been discussing recently, this doesn't just apply to veterans, this applies really to everyone. If you can, try approaching your grad studies with an abundance mindset rather than a scarcity mindset in terms of focusing on getting the work done and getting through the readings. And the reason why I say this is there's a ton that comes at you. And I think assuming you go to grad school, this might be your last opportunity to be in school. And so my cohort and I have been encouraging each other to really focus on what you want to get out of this program and what you want to focus on. And, it can be okay to skim a reading. I hope my professors aren't watching this, by the way. No, I'm just kidding. That's fine. But I do think that I think that's a piece of advice that's helped a lot of folks in my cohort has been, focus on what you want to focus on in grad school. It'll help you be more engaged, and it'll enrich in our cohort experience when you're really, nerding out about one specific thing or getting really focused on something that's really interesting to you, because there's a lot of learning through our peers. And the more that you are free to focus on what you're interested in, the more that we can sort of learn through what you learn. So I think that's a piece of advice that really helps in grad school, at least, is to, you know, have an abundance mindset and focus on what's important, and, maybe let some other things slip through the cracks instead of spinning your wheels on trying to cover all of your bases.
Also not going to duplicate any efforts of Sean, Tom, or Steven. I think one thing I would recommend is to not focus on the degree itself, not focus on what that degree is going to get you. There's a lot of other intangibles, or tangibles even, that maybe people aren't thinking of outright at the beginning or onset of their program. And that's the cohort, and just networking within your cohort, and just you get a lot of access to, world-class, professors and their knowledge and their recommendations, and they've seen, all these students come before, and they've kept in touch with these students, and they kind of know how to help you chart a path to get to your goal. And additionally, I think just being part of academia, again, is great access to information on different fellowships, or maybe, internships or opportunities that might help bridge the gap between you've just graduated and now you want to get to your goal. And those fellowships and internships can really help bridge that gap and get you to that destination.
Thank you. So we are coming closer to the end of this. And so Daniel, has been wonderful to hang in there and listen to our advice and the story sharing. Daniel, we just wanted to know if there are any questions you have for the panel, and you are welcome to unmute yourself and ask the question, or you are welcome to drop it in the chat.
Oh, okay. I can turn can I turn on the video, or we'll just leave that up? It's pretty great to hear from everybody. Just being a veteran, just for the past 10 years, I've been completing my undergraduate, and I guess just trying to adjust to civilian life and figuring out what's next. What pretty much drew me here was I did an internship at the Washington State Senate, and that was pretty exhilarating, being there. But type of questions I have, is I really don't have none as of right now, honestly.
Great. I have some questions for you.
Oh, okay.
Are you considering the executive MPA program, or are you considering the MPA program?
I am undecided right now.
Okay.
Pretty much, yeah.
The executive MPA program has a 7-year minimum work experience requirement, but your military does serve as work experience.
Okay.
So depending on how long that is, you are actually eligible for the MPA or the executive MPA. And so I guess the question would be, what would you hope to accomplish with your graduate degree?
I'm highly interested in the world of pretty much public policy. I was a legislative assistant at the state too. And so just working with just working with the community, that's one of my biggest things. Like I just want to work with the community and just try to solve some of these help to solve these complex problems that we have. my professors in my undergrad, they pretty much kind of pushed me to go this route. Like they pushed me to apply for the internship at the state senate. And then also I had a part-time professor who she was teaching a public policy class at Central Washington University, and just being in her class, she even asked me, have you ever thought about going into public policy? And I guess because of like the questions, and I tried to bring in different perspectives in the different group settings that I find myself in.
Right. So when you think of public policy, what are some of those policy areas that you are really passionate about?
So pretty much urban planning is one. So urban planning is one of my big ones, and education has slowly becoming a big one. And that's because of my experience as a kid or as a child who one parent only have like a high school diploma, and the other one and my other parent, didn't finish high school, and just realizing certain resources that I guess I could have had. It's just, I don't know. It's just I'm seeing certain things it's people passing a policy, but it's like, it's not, to me, it's not going all the way, if that makes sense.
It's not going as far as you need to go to see change.
Yes, exactly. Yes. And after having front row seats of seeing that, it really invigorated me to like dig in my heels and finish some classes, and then going to this program as well.
And so I will turn it back to the panel. Given that what you've heard about Daniel, what advice would you offer him?
I think I can weigh in. I work with Daniel. It's great to hear you. At Sound Transit here in the region, I work with a ton of urban planners and a bunch of people that do community outreach, and a bunch of people that have, been trained in urban planning and do community outreach and all kinds of stuff. And I think, knowing them, knowing how many people went to the Evans School, knowing how many people are at the University of Washington broadly, I think you can't go wrong with this program. And I think that's another thing of like having this school helps you get connected to a lot of those teams, a lot of those folks. We have a bunch of different folks cycling, and even in my team from the Evans School right now, I sit here and I stare at 4 different Evans grads over across there. One just finished her PhD here at the Evans School. So it is, I don't think there's a better community, a better school to merge those two things that I know of, especially if you're interested in this region. So highly encourage you to keep pursuing it, keep talking to folks like Dr. Miller and everybody at the school. I think it's a perfect place if that's where you want to be and what you want to potentially learn more about.
Yeah, I greatly appreciate it. I'm originally from Georgia, but JBLM pretty much brought me up here, and I just been so involved. I don't know, it's like I just spent so much learning the ins and out of this state. And it I didn't just seeing like so many people who I worked with at the Capitol coming out of Evans, and even having like just networking, and just so many people just pointed me towards this school. So it's it's like, okay, let me jump in. It's like someone said earlier, there's no right time, and I had to tell myself that like there's really no right time, because I kept pushing the can down the road.
So, Daniel, this is Tom, if I may. So, as you're looking at, I know sounds like you may be considering the standard MPA or the EMPA. And your military experience really matters. I mean, you've been on the planet a little longer than maybe some of the traditional MPA students. And the other thing I think we've all talked about is the power of the cohort. And, a good portion of your cohort are going to be active practitioners of public policy. while they're showing up for these weekends, and you'll be sitting right next to them and learning from them and being able to talk to them. It's not just the educational networking, there is the very real career networking that happens during the cohort. So that's really what executive programs are it brings something to the table that's a little different than the other piece. And so if you're looking to, I don't know your whole situation, but if you want to get going on life and your career and school, you can do all those things at the same time. And then the advantages of the executive program, may outweigh versus a standard MPA. I mean, Dr. Miller can obviously give me a lot more thoughts on that, but I'm still amazed, man. I've been working a long time, and I can pick up the phone and call some folks that I did not know before my EMPA program for problems that had perplexed me for a long time, and able to have a conversation with somebody who was not just a classmate, not just somebody who's a public policy practitioner, but really who's a friend, and they have experience, so that has real matter to me.
Yeah, and one thing that I would add, almost is the other side of the coin of what you just said, Tom. I mean, I'm in the EMPA program, and one thing you might consider. I don't remember if you mentioned that you, what your career is or where you are in your career currently. I think one of the big sort of delineating factors between choosing an executive MPA program and a full-time MPA program. The full-time MPA program is structured such that there is sort of a summer break where you kind of typically do an internship in that time. So if you are, trying to, if part of your MPA experience is getting more opportunity and access to careers and public administration, public service, doing the full-time program and doing that internship can be kind of a key step to set you up for that transition. Of course, you can do similar things in the executive program, and of course, the benefit of the executive program is you can keep your job or work full-time while going to school. So there's obviously financial trade-offs between working full-time and going to school full-time, but that is kind of one of the big differing factors, is that sort of internship opportunity between year 1 and year 2. And also, if you feel like you have a ton to explore and not too much of a sort of focus that you have going into it, I think the curriculum of the full-time MPA is a little bit more extensive, perhaps. And so if you think you'd benefit from that internship and maybe going a little deeper in classes, then the full-time might be something you'd consider. And for obvious reasons that I think we've already talked about, there's reasons why the executive format might work for you. So just would encourage you to think through some of those mechanics of what the EMPA is solving for and how you want to spend your time in MPA to figure out which program is best suited to you.
Well, thank you.
I can dovetail off that. I did the traditional MPA program, and I did do the internship in the summer. And I can definitely say that the internship I did is the reason that I'm currently in government right now. And it's not that the internship led to a job in that organization I interned at. That was not the case. But that internship on my resume, they said, okay, this person's kind of maybe paid their dues, or this person has already worked in government already. I did my internship with the government. And as a result of having that government experience, even though for a short period of time as an internship, I think that's what led to, me getting the interview where I currently am at. And so I think that's definitely the door opener, is those internships. So.
Daniel, did you have any other questions?
No, not this time.
Okay. I am going to drop in the chat box my email address. And you can contact me directly. We can schedule a one-on-one. We can walk through a comparison of the executive MPA versus the traditional MPA or part-time MPA. It really depends on what your goals are. So if your goals are you really want to get into that analytical, more quantitative focus, then the traditional MPA may be for you. But there are also benefits of the leadership and the management sides of the executive MPA that you also will find value in. And I love coming back to the EMPA and having the cohort, whether it's 5 years ago or 10 years ago, saying, do you remember those binders? And we had to just keep going back to these binders. And, I'm so tired of the binders, but when I graduated, I kept going back to the binders because that's where we found our answers. But our EMPA alumni also talk about the network and the community that they formed. So when there are opportunities that arise in their department, they often consider their cohort members for those positions, whether it's consulting or whether it's going back as an assistant. But there's always this camaraderie that I see in the EMPA that is by far the strongest that I've seen. When I put the call out for these webinars, EMPA is right on it. I will send it out, and 5 minutes later, it's yes, Dr. Miller, count me in. And so I'm so grateful for the time that our panelists shared with us. I learned so much each time I'm listening to you. I think Stephen is currently completing the program, and Stephen and Sean just completed the program. And so you just need a few more weeks away from the program to really digest what did you really experience, where Tom can say, wow, this is what I experienced having that distance between the time I graduated and now, and how that EMPA really benefited me in my career and how I use different components of the curriculum on a day-to-day basis. And so I really want to take this time to thank my panelists for joining us this evening. Daniel, I want to thank you for showing up and making it possible for me to learn more about our alumni and all of the amazing things they're doing in the community and their work with public in service. Thank you very much. And that will conclude this webinar.
Thanks all.
Thank
Nice
you.
meeting everybody. Thanks,
Thanks,
Dr. Miller.
everyone.
Thanks all.
Thank you.